Yeah, one thing I would ask him is how he's thinking about time horizons here, because there's all this talk about, oh, maybe the Fed would be comfortable with inflation at 3%. Maybe they could change the target. But it would be just as easy and relevant to ask, are you comfortable with higher than expected inflation for longer if the direction of travel is basically what you want to see? Could you hold off on hikes for a year with inflation at 3%? There's nothing in the target about unemployment and inflation that says you have to have it right now. It's more you have to be moving in that direction. So I'd be curious about that.
Yeah, and you know, like 3 years ago at Jackson Hole, I guess it was virtual in 2020, but that's when the Fed unveiled its flexible average inflation targeting, which is essentially just this acknowledgement that trade-offs exist. And it's like, okay, we'll pay a higher price on the inflation side if it means a rapid return to full employment. So I think it's interesting still to like wrestle with this trade-offs question, because like we have a good labor market right now. That's something that does not come along very often. I think if you look at like periods in which one might say the Fed is hitting a full employment mandate, it's not that common. Most of the time there seems to be a considerable, or at least some degree of slack. So the question is like, how long do we want to preserve this? And is it worth like really fighting to keep this, even if it means, you know, again, some patience about, right, is it got to be exactly 2%? Could it be 2.25%, 2.5%? Like, what do we've achieved something here on the employment side. How much are we willing to pay to keep that?
Okay, you guys got there yesterday. We have 1 minute left, Tracy. What are the conversations that you're having at the bar, at the restaurants? Who are you running into? Tell us about it.
Tom Keene.
Yeah, Tom Keene talks about
into
his favorite breakfast dish. That's pretty much it.
Oh, so it's
20
just
minutes
like The Office.
about hashed bacon.
It's pretty much just like The Office, running into Tom Keene, hearing him talk about
No, actually, well, Joe brought up a good point, which is we do have this historically low unemployment rate, and that is happening at a time of massive fiscal expansion, which is something that we haven't really seen before. And so there's a lot of debate about how does the world live with higher levels of debt, and what are the best ways to, I guess, invest and trade in those higher levels of debt.
Yeah, well, just make sure Mr. Keene doesn't stiff you with his bar tab. I heard he does that all the time. All right, guys, have fun out there. Looking forward to your reporting and your conversations. Those are the co-hosts of the Out Louds podcast, Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Alloway. Tracy is Bloomberg News Executive Editor, Joe, Digital News Executive Editor here at Bloomberg. Check out their podcast at Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. A tech rally fizzles. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ 100 index, and the Russell 2000 all declined today. Lots of earnings after the bell. We begin with Marvell Technology. The stock now lower by 11%. It did report adjusted EPS for the second quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Workday boosting its subscription revenue forecast for the full year, down 3%. Gap out of San Francisco reporting adjusted EPS for the second quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. However, it is guiding lower for the third quarter. Gap shares right now down by roughly 7%. So here's where we ended today's session ahead of Jay Powell tomorrow. S&P down 59 points. Late day fade there, dropping 1.3%. Dow Industrials down 373 points, lower by 1.1%. NASDAQ, the composite index, down 257, a drop there of 1.8%. 10-year yield 4.23%, with a 2-year yielding 5.01%, back above 5% today. Spot gold up $1.45 the ounce to $19.16, up by about 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 61 cents a barrel, 78.88 on WTI. A drop there of less than 0.1%. Lots of focus on NVIDIA today. After last night's blowout report, NVIDIA did gain 0.1%, have been up by 6.6%. Also out with earnings, Splunk. That stock up today by 12.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week on this Thursday. So in the tech world, it wasn't just about NVIDIA today. In fact, that stock's rally ran out of steam, but not so for shares of the infrastructure software company, cyber security company Splunk, soaring up the most since December, closing at a 52-week high today, following earnings and a quarterly update after the close last night. The stock is up roughly 32% year to date, so roughly doubling its return in 2023, thanks, Tim, to today's rally.
Yeah, Splunk reported a second quarter revenue that beat estimates. It raised its full year forecast beyond expectations. Analysts called the results solid overall, noting the better annual recurring revenue as well as the upgraded forecast. We got with us right now Splunk President and CEO Gary Steele. He joins us on Zoom from San Francisco. Gary, how are you?
Hey, it's great to be here.
You know, we've been hearing a lot about when we hear from companies, we like to hear how, you know, their customers are doing because it gives us an idea of the economy. How are your customers doing?
Yeah, it was interesting. In our second quarter, we saw very much the same macro conditions that we'd seen in prior quarters. And so where it impacted us is we saw some hesitation in cloud migrations because these represent new projects that have to be funded. And while the ROI and getting to the cloud is amazing, you still have to fund the actual migration effort. And then we saw continued deal scrutiny, so deals elongating or requiring additional signatures. I think the one positive thing for us is I think we understand it now, and I think our team did just a phenomenal job executing within that environment and understanding that, yes, there will be more reviews and more scrutiny on deals, but we executed quite well. I'm really proud of the team.
Reviews and scrutiny are one thing, but what about deals falling through?
We saw more consistency in terms of just scrutiny, and I think there was more, I would call it just stabilization. So I think going into the quarter, people knew what dollars they were going to be able to spend.
All right, so how would you describe then the corporate IT spend environment generally? Is there a word, Gary, to say? Because I think it helps us in a big way understand kind of what's to come maybe for the rest of the year and what maybe is going on in the economy.
Yeah, I think there still remains a high level of scrutiny on every dollar being spent by the IT community. And while I think we've executed well within that environment, we anticipate no change as we work through the second half. We will continue to see this level of scrutiny and hesitations as it relates to us in this category of cloud migration. So we're expecting no change. And that's how we've thought about providing our guidance for the go-forward quarters.
What's cool talking about you, and I got this off your website, 15,000 customers, 110 countries, Zoom, Intel, Coca-Cola, Carnival, REI, Airbus, and many more. It's the world. It's the universe, if you will. So what types of companies are leading the spend, though? Which ones might there be some hesitation?
We saw pretty consistent behavior across verticals. Our business, we've had, as an example, we do a lot of work with the government and governments around the world. That's been relatively consistent for us. And a big growth opportunity today, roughly 2/3 of our business is domestic, 1/3 is international. We continue to see a lot of opportunity working with international customers to take advantage of the capabilities we can offer. But from a buying point of view, buying perspective, it was pretty consistent around the globe.
Can we talk about what you guys do? Because you also have your own
Sure.
AI offerings, which I know you guys put out last month. But cybersecurity company, I feel like that's a big bucket, right? Infrastructure software company, big bucket. So just walk, for those who might not be familiar with your, almost $19 billion market cap company, which they should be. Tell us about exactly what you do.
You bet. We help organizations drive digital resilience across their cyber environment. So how do we ensure that they're well protected and they understand what's going on in their cyber environment? This is particularly important as we face new SEC disclosure requirements where you have to notify your shareholders within 4 days of a material event. We're at the core of helping organizations figure out what the heck happened and how can you meet that 4-day deadline. And then we extend broadly into the observability market, meaning how we're core to helping organizations keep their digital applications up and running so that their customers can get access to all of those services. So helping them understand if something happens to one of those applications, what's going on and how do you get it up and running quickly and try to anticipate those events. Where AI plays a role for us is helping across security and broader infrastructure anticipate things. So trying to get better outcomes faster so teams can be more efficient in what they do every day. So for example, in the Security Operations Center, just making it easier to operate and get to better outcomes faster without all the manual work.
So with the AI euphoria, how do you think about it in terms of, is it really something that this next gen AI, generative AI, really going to take so many different industries to a different level? It's the real Megillah, if you will.
Yeah, no, I'm super enthusiastic about it. I feel like we can deliver much better outcomes for our customers leveraging the power of AI and simple things that we've already introduced. So to use Splunk, you interact with it with a proprietary language. Well, with generative AI, we can give you a human interface. So just ask Splunk what you want, and we will help you go find it and do it. And so then we generate all that proprietary language on your behalf, and you don't have to have that knowledge or understanding. So our ability to take down the skills required, make it so much easier to interact with our product, we're very bullish on that. It's still early, and I think there's a lot of hype in the market generally. But I think at the end of the day, we can make a real difference in one, who can interact with their product, and then the outcomes that can be delivered as a result of that. And this is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, but we can continue to chip away at this and make real progress. I think it will be transformational in our industry because we deal with such rich data sets.
Right.
And in that world, you can get great outcomes from AI.
When you're leveraging AI for your customers, who are the suppliers that you're using? Are you getting chips from NVIDIA? Are you getting chips from AMD?
So we think about it from a cloud perspective. And so we're going to the cloud service providers and we're leveraging the cloud service providers to be able to deliver those AI capabilities. We're not directly buying or setting up data centers. We're not directly buying NVIDIA chips and systems, housing NVIDIA chips. We're going to the cloud service providers to get those capabilities.
Like an Amazon Web Services?
Or Microsoft?
Amazon, we just announced a relationship with Microsoft as it relates to bringing our native cloud solutions to the Azure platform. And then we have a relationship with Google as well for GCP. So we find demand across those, and we're leveraging their relationships ultimately all the way through the chip providers.
How much do those relationships kind of impact your top and bottom lines or give you kind of some window into consistency for growth for your company?
So one, they're very critical. They're critical strategic partners for us. There's two dynamics here. One is we allow our customers to buy through the marketplaces of each of those cloud service providers, meaning you can go and leverage the credits you have for AWS, or now with our relationship with Microsoft, you can leverage your Azure credits. So it makes buying easier. And then we work closely with them to ensure that you get a great technical outcome. So you guys asking about chips, et cetera, we can make sure that we're well tuned for whatever systems they bring to bear and how we can make sure that our customers are getting the maximum TCO.
I want to end, Gary, just kind of where we began and getting your view on what the economy looks like. There are a lot of questions as we wait to hear from Jay Powell tomorrow about what the economy looks like. Just in the last 45 seconds that we have with you, what's your read?
I believe we're going to see the same for some period of time. We haven't built that into, we haven't built any improvement into our guidance, and I think that I believe we're in a soft landing mode, that we're going to continue to see some conservatism, but we'll work our way out of this over time.
Well, so enjoyed our conversation with you. Be well and look forward to next time. Splunk President and CEO Gary Steele joining us on Zoom from San Francisco. As we said, the stock a standout in today's session, really rallying and outperforming. It was one of my gainers earlier when we talked with our TV colleagues. Hey, just quickly, Gap out with their earnings. It's up, bouncing around right now. It's down about 0.3%. Second quarter total comp sales down 6%. The estimate was for a decline of 4.5%. And we are looking at second quarter EPS, adjusted EPS, 34 cents a share. The estimate was for 9.7. We're kind of trying to make some sense of this, so we'll continue to track here in the aftermarket.
In the meantime, let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. Some of Donald Trump's supporters are in Atlanta, where the former president will surrender at 7:30 p.m. Wall Street time tonight on charges connected to Georgia's election investigation. This man is waiting outside the Fulton County Jail.
He needs to be back in the White House and making us have a big country again and making it so that we can be energy independent and we can be a rich country again instead of what Biden's doing.
Trump will be booked and photographed when he turns himself in. Another defendant, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, surrendered earlier in the afternoon. DA Fani Willis is asked to judge for the trial to begin October 23rd, but the Trump team is resisting that date. House Republicans are moving to start an investigation of Willis, saying they have serious concerns about whether her case against Trump and 18 others is politically motivated. The first debate of the 2024 Republican primary season is in the books, and of the 8 candidates who took the Fox News stage in Milwaukee last night, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is being declared the most pleasant surprise by the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Haley says there's more where that came from.
We have to focus on the issues at hand. How do we get inflation down? Too many families can't afford groceries. They can't afford their rent. They can't afford gas. They can't afford child care.
Nikki Haley spoke with Bloomberg this morning from Milwaukee. U.S. officials believe yesterday's plane crash in Russia was an assassination ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin, with Wagner head Yevgeny Prigozhin the target. The Pentagon's Brigadier General Pat Ryder.
Our initial assessment is that it's likely Prigozhin was killed. We're continuing to assess the situation.
Ryder says they do not believe the plane was downed by a surface-to-air missile. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. A late day fizzle for the U.S. stock market. NASDAQ 100 index down 2% today. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all ended the session in the red. A rally in big tech fizzled fast. Bond yields rose as well. Let's begin with the equity market because the S&P was down 59 points today. That is a drop of just about 1.4%. Dow Industrials fell today by 371 points, down 1.1%. NASDAQ, the composite index, lower today by 1.9%, and NASDAQ 100 index was down 2.2%. 10-year yield now at 4.23%, with a 2-year yielding 5.02%. Spot gold up $1.50 the ounce, little change there to $19.16, and West Texas Intermediate crude also little change, lower by 0.1%, $78.84 a barrel. So it was a down day on Wall Street today, with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumping. What about what is driving U.S. markets? Nadia Lovell is Senior U.S. Equity Strategist at UBS Global Wealth Management, and she was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I think what you're seeing in the market right now is that this pullback on risk-off sentiment. Remember, liquidity is kind of low this time of year in August, and so it's not surprising to see people take a little bit of risk off of the table ahead of the upcoming Labor Day holiday.
And you can hear more of that conversation on the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. You can get it wherever you download your podcast. After the closing bell, we did hear from Gap. It reported second quarter comparable sales and revenue that missed the average analyst estimate. Now, these results come 3 days into CEO Richard Dixon's tenure, who joined the company from Mattel after his success with the Barbie franchise. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Really do appreciate it. Well, although masks have come off for many of us, and for the most part, many of us are back to normal, even if that normal is a bit different, COVID is still here, and a lot of people right now, Carol, are still getting it. I don't know if you saw this just yesterday. The New York City Department of Health said that cases in the city are on the rise, and some people should consider wearing a mask in crowded indoor settings.
Listen, we've had folks with masks back in the office who were getting over having COVID. We're also learning more about the virus and its aftermath. A study published this week in the journal Nature found that people who were never sick enough to be hospitalized for acute COVID still had a higher risk than uninfected people of developing long COVID-related disorders such as dangerous blood clots, diabetes, and lung, gastrointestinal, and musculoskeletal disease 2 years later.
Well, very pleased to have with us Dr. Andy Pekosh, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. I almost gave you a promotion there, Dr. Pekosh, but it's good to have you with us this afternoon.
Well deserved.
Yes, president in my book. How's that? We should note the Bloomberg School of Public Health that is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Dr. Pekosh, good to have you with us right now. I want to start with the new variants that we're seeing right now and why we're seeing this uptick. It's summer. What's going on?
Well, COVID-19 has never really left us. We were fortunate over the past few months to have very low numbers of cases, but we were still having cases and we were still seeing viruses that were essentially doing what viruses do. They mutate, they change so that they can keep circulating in the population. We were just seeing that at a very low level. We're not sure what the factors are that are driving this surge of cases right now, but I think it's important to note that case numbers are low, as you had mentioned, but this is a time to remember, what is it that we're going to be doing if we do come up COVID-19 positive, and to remember that there are very vulnerable parts of the population who should perhaps pay a little bit more attention and take a little bit more care to avoid being infected.
Andy, how are you guys thinking at Johns Hopkins about where we are in the COVID cycle and virus? And is it something becoming more akin to kind of the annual flu? Are you thinking about that, or is it still something maybe a little bit more serious, or could be, again, something more serious?
Well, in terms of disease, it's clear that influenza itself is dangerous. COVID-19 is even more dangerous than influenza. It causes more hospitalizations on a per-case basis, causes more deaths on a per-case basis. So we really consider COVID-19 as seriously, if not more seriously, than influenza.
Is that across different age groups, or does that include kids also?
It is across age groups. The relative risk, though, is very different, right? So while COVID is more dangerous in young kids than influenza, the case numbers and the numbers of severe cases are much lower there than if you compare it to, let's say, individuals over the age of 65.
Wait a second. Hold on. I want to make sure I understand this. Influenza is not as dangerous in kids as COVID is?
COVID causes more severe disease in children across the board than influenza would.
That's really interesting. I mean, influenza is the flu shot. When you have young kids, like the flu shot is the one you really want them to get. I don't feel like the COVID vaccine is being pushed as hard for young children as flu shots.
And in some ways, you're correct. Now, we're waiting for the CDC guidance to come out for this year's fall COVID vaccinations. But certainly, if you look across the board, the American Pediatric Association recommends school children get COVID-19 vaccinations in the same way they recommend getting flu vaccinations. So the vaccines that we have, it's important to note, they work, they're safe, and irrespective of age groups, if you get the vaccine, you can reduce the likelihood of severe disease, and you can most likely reduce the chance of spreading the virus to other individuals.
So there's a chance as we await the guidance on the vaccines for this fall that not everybody needs to have it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's certainly clear that if you're in some of these high-risk groups for severe COVID-19, again, over the age of 65, if you have, if you're immunocompromised in any way, if you have certain medical conditions that make you more predisposed to severe disease, I'm virtually positive that all those groups will be recommended to get a COVID-19 vaccine. The benefits of vaccination in other age groups are a little less clear simply because you don't have as many severe cases in those groups. But when you look at the viruses that have been circulating now, when you look at what people were vaccinated with, the viruses circulating now are very different from the vaccine. So it would really make sense for almost everybody to consider getting a COVID-19 vaccine right now because it'll help them much, much more in terms of limiting their chance of getting an infection.
Wait, right now or in the fall when the new one comes out?
In the fall.
Okay. Because we don't have access to that one yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That one should be rolling out middle of September, end of September or so. And again, before that rolls out, we should be getting some clear guidance from the CDC about who they strongly recommend to get it and who they think should get it.
Okay, when our producer mentioned this subject on the call this morning, I was like, wait, what? This is kind of crazy. But he brought to our attention, big thanks to Paul Brennan and everyone else in the control room, that you could benefit by getting all of your COVID shots in the same arm each time you go and get another shot. Have you seen this research?
Yeah, there's one publication in particular that recently came out that suggests that if you get the shot in the same arm, that you have a slightly higher response, particularly in something we call T-cell responses, which is a separate arm of the immune system from the antibodies that we always talk about after vaccines.
I don't even remember what arm I got my shot
I
in.
do my left because I'm a right-handed, so I feel like if it gets sore, that's how I do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that the effects there were significant, but the antibody responses were the same irrespective of which arm you got it into or how many or whether you alternated there. So it's probably one of those interesting subtle things, but it's certainly not something that we should lose sleep over if you're going in to get a vaccine. It's much, much better to get the vaccine in either arm than to not get the vaccine.
Are we getting complacent and not getting ready for the next kind of virus that hits us and just got about 25 seconds?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to stay aware. We're seeing cases of, parasites like malaria here in Maryland. We're seeing infections with tropical viruses in Florida. We have to be aware that new viruses can show up for a number of reasons, and we have to keep our guard up for them.
Right. We've been talking too about climate change, a warmer environment, certainly fertile ground for creating all of this. Dr. Andy Pekash, thank you so much. We lean on you guys. Professor of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, of course, supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP. This is Bloomberg Radio.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, just getting word that the county of Maui is now suing Hawaiian Electric Industries for damages caused to the county's property by fires, including the blaze that destroyed the historic town of Lahaina. Dropbox, a provider of online data storage, is ending its unlimited option, saying a small handful of customers were using massive amounts of resources that had the potential to degrade the cloud service for the rest of its clients. Dropbox today up by 1.1%. The wireless carrier T-Mobile USA is cutting its global workforce by just under 7%. And with more on that story, here's Bloomberg's Kimberly Adams.
Charlie, word came in a regulatory filing, and T-Mobile says the move will affect about 5,000 positions, mostly corporate and back office staff, along with some technology roles. The company said retail and consumer care experts won't be impacted. T-Mobile's CEO said in a letter to employees that the cost of attracting and retaining customers is materially more expensive than it was just a few quarters ago. Mobile rival AT&T has also been cutting jobs. Charlie?
And that's Kimberly Adams reporting. Today, T-Mobile shares down 2.2%, Verizon up 0.6%, AT&T lower by 0.1%. Dollar Tree shares plunged today as its outlook fell short of analyst estimates. Shares of the retailer today, Dollar Tree was down by just about 13%. Those are some of the top stories, some of the top company stories we're following for you at this hour. I'm Charlie Pelletin. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Got it, buddy?
Oh, I got it.
Should we do a little news?
Let's do some news.
Well, the national news?
Yeah, Nancy Lyons is in our Bloomberg newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Tim. Donald Trump is expected to turn himself into Georgia authorities at 7:30 tonight, Wall Street time, in connection with charges he illegally schemed to overturn the state's 2020 election results. The DA is now saying she'd like the trial to begin on October 23rd. Trump supporters like Adrian Robinson are waiting outside the Fulton County Jail.
We're watching all the games that they're playing. They're pulling out all the tricks. I kind of figured it was going to happen anyway. Donald Trump is such a strong candidate. They can't stop Donald Trump.
Trump's expected surrender comes on the heels of a shakeup of his legal team. Prominent Atlanta criminal defense attorney Steve Sadow took the place of another high-profile criminal defense attorney, Drew Findling, who had represented Trump as recently as Monday when his bond terms were negotiated. The prosecutor who brought the case against Trump and 18 co-defendants is facing new pressure from Capitol Hill. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
House Republicans have launched a probe into Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, sent the DA a letter today asking for documents and other material, including any communications between her office and the Justice Department. Jordan says Willis's actions raise serious concerns about whether they're politically motivated. Jordan and his committee mounted a similar probe into Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg when he brought charges against Trump over hush payments during the 2016 campaign. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
U.S. officials now believe an explosion is what brought down the private jet yesterday, believed to be carrying mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. There's been no official confirmation of Prigozhin's death, but Russian President Vladimir Putin today commented on the crash and mentioned Prigozhin in past tense, saying he made some serious mistakes in life, but he also achieved necessary results. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now back to you, Tim and Carol.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Tim Stenevec. And watching shares of Gap in the after hours, actually up about 1.9%. Second quarter comp sales and revenue missed the average analyst estimate, underscoring ongoing weakness at the retailer's 4 brands. Keep in mind, it's got a new CEO, Richard Dixon.
Came from Mattel.
Absolutely, and really responsible or given or credited with really turning the Barbie franchise around. I think he was COO at that company.
Yeah, he has yet to lay out a vision for the future of Gap. He's expected to bring stability to the company. It's faced a leadership upheaval in recent years, Carol, amid prolonged weakness. Here's what he said in a statement, quote, "We have to do things differently with a clear focus on redefining our brand's meaning to consumers, focusing on creativity, designing for relevance as a pursuit rather than a goal, and leveraging our remarkable legacy.
Now remember, the Gap, it's a bunch of brands. Comp sales fell 6% across the 4 brands in the second quarter. That's a third consecutive drop, due mostly to large declines at Old Navy, Banana Republic, and Athleta. Net sales also narrowly